Have you ever had to make a dynamic number of updates to your Power App? So the idea is that you need to allocate resources or consume things, but it's a variable number, a variable amount, right? So the way that we would do that in other programming languages is called a do until loop. But we're low code people, right? I'm not a developer. I don't know how to do that stuff. So how do we do that in Power Apps? Power Apps does not have a do until loop. So what we're going to have to do is make our own. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a timer control to do that. And why would we do this? So the example I always use is one we built for customers a few years ago. And that is this idea that we want to give out tickets, right? So we have 12 soccer tickets. And then people put their name on a list and said they wanted anywhere from 1 to 4 tickets. And so then now on Friday before the game, we have to loop through those tickets. You're like, well, Shane, 12 is a stack number. It is, but the 1 to 4 is not. So imagine, right? You give away 2. Well, now you gotta give away 10. Now you give away 4. Now you gotta give away 6, right? And so then you start to work through that. And so building this dynamic loop that will go through that data one at a time until you get to the right answer, that's the challenge today. So let's jump into my desktop and take a look. All right, so over here, we're not going to show you that customers app. They didn't want to show you their fun stuff, but I built another one, right? Because this is the other customer scenario that we've done, and that's removing items from inventory. So here, the customer, they've got 9 sticks of RAM in their warehouse. But if you look over here on the right, you can see that, well, in one bin, there's 1. In this bin, there's 3. There's none in that bin. There's 1 in this bin, 1 in that one, 3, etc. Right? What happens in this scenario if we want to give out 7 sticks of RAM, right? I want to go get 7. We're picking those, and we need to decrement the inventory. So I need to grab 1 from here, 3 from here, right? And go through the process. So we go over here, we say number to pick, we say 7, and we say pick. And now what's going to happen is behind the scenes, there is a timer that is running. And so every second it is running, doing the job of picking RAM. And then once it's picked the RAM, it's removing it from inventory and reducing the number. And so now it's finished. If you look, so this one now has 0. Remember it, and it was updated true. So we know we took 1 from there. We took 3 from here. So that's 4. We took 1 from there, 5, 6. And then look down here at the bottom, this last one, it had 3 pieces, but we only needed to take 1. So we needed logic that was smart enough not to just take all the pieces, but to only take the 1. So there's still 2 pieces of RAM left on that shelf. We're not gonna go through this app yet. We will at the end, right? But I gotta explain to you how this thing works at a simple level before we look at this one, because this one, took me a lot longer to build than the little demo we're going to do. Also, while I'm switching over there, remember, I've got some upcoming training classes over at training.powerapps911.com. So if you're trying to test with building these types of apps and you want to do complex, hard things, you want to get better at Power Apps, and you want to learn hands-on with me, go check out our training classes. I'd love to have you, love to do a little one-on-one and get to learn all this stuff. But for now, let's do this. So let's insert ourselves a new screen here. And now that we have a new screen, so the key to a do loop is we need to have a timer, right? So insert a good old input, and then down here we have the timer control. And this is one of those things to remember, right? We've talked about this before. I almost never, literally never use timers to time things. We use timers for animations, like the animated menu that we showed last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever that was. And then we use it for things like this. I want to loop through. And so how do you do something like that? So the first thing you want to do is the duration. So the duration is currently 60,000. Remember, this is milliseconds, so that is 1 minute. So we're going to change this to 1,000. Okay, so that means the timer is going to run for 1 second. And now what I want to do is remember your timers have both a on timer end and start. In these do until scenarios, typically what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, on timer end. Right? Because I want to wait a second, and then when it gets done, we can run some type of code. And so right now we're going to make this super easy on ourselves, and we're just going to create a variable. So we're just going to call it update context, right? Because we want to learn how this works before we get fancy. So var count, and then we're just going to say var count equals var count plus 1, like that. Basically, every time this runs, that will add a number to the variable, right? And then what we're going to do, go down here, and we're going to say, so we're just going to say we want this thing to run 10 times. So what you're going to do now is you're going to go, because we don't have a do until, but you're just going to say, hey, when we get to here, we're going to say if var count is less than 10, right? So if it's not got to 10 yet, then run again. What do we want to do? So if it's less than 10, we just want the timer to run again, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable. We're going to do update context, var, move my cursor out of the way, run timer. Oh, got to put my curly braces in front of that. And then we're going to do a colon, And then we're going to say false, close that, and then we're going to copy that and then do true, right? So this is my old-fashioned method for causing a timer or other control to trigger, right? We're going to set a variable to false and then set it back to true. There's other ways to do this, but this has always been my favorite way. So that's what we're going to do. And if var count is 10 or greater, right? What do we want to do? We're just going to do a notify, and then we're going to say, we done. I know, very fancy stuff, right? It's about the mechanics right now, not about the fanciness. So that's the very simple context here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here to the timer start property. Remember, we have this var run timer. And so you're going to go to the start property, and you're going to just set that to var run timer. So that toggling from false to true will cause the timer to run. So now we want to start the timer. And so actually, you know what? We're going to start the timer. I usually do it by clicking it, but I think that's a little weird. So we'll just do this, and we'll just go to this little button up here. We'll say update context, var count, we'll set it to 0. And then var run timer, we'll set it to true. Close our curlies like so. There you go. We'll change the text this button to start. And then of course, what else we need to do? We need a label on the screen, and this label is going to show us var, oh, that's not, I did that, var count, right? So that's just text, and we'll do an ampersand and then var count like so. So right now it's blank. So now if we hit play, we can say start, what happens? Right, the timer runs for 1 second, you guys see the blink. Every time it runs for 1 second, it does the increment. I did 10 instead of 5 like I meant to. But then now when it's to 10, we done. Yes. Right? So that is what we call a do until loop. Right? I spent like 4 million years in, programming class to learn that. Sad for me, right? I'm not very smart. And so then now, right, that for a lot of you might be all you needed, right? That might be the emphasis that you needed to run with. And I'll be honest, years ago, Daniel LeMay taught me this. He's like, hey, this is how I built this. He's built these that kind of nest inside each other. He's done some really crazy stuff with it. We're not going to do crazy stuff. But what we're learning here is that this is the idea, right? When the timer ends, we do something. In this case, we updated a variable, but you could have patched a data source. You could have filtered data source. You could have ran a flow, right? You can do whatever you want on timer end. So do your thing. And then when you're done doing your thing, check to see, are you done, right? And so in my case, it was just by getting the variable to 10, that got me done. Maybe for you, it's when you filter the data source and there's no more records that meet your criteria. Maybe for you, it's when the flow returns that, yes, all the data is there, right? Like we've used these before to kind of make a wait, right? Like, so we ran a flow that kicked off a stored procedure that took a couple minutes to run. And so the app just sat and waited, and the timer kind of checked every 3 seconds to see, hey, is all the data in the table that we expected it to because the stored procedure is done? We just kind of kept waiting for the number of records to match the number of records before we went forward. Another way to use these type of loops. That's it, right? Do something, check to see if it's done. If it's not done, run the timer again. If it is done, do, right, notify, send an email, do a pop-up, do nothing, it doesn't matter, right? But you have the control. And remember, the start, right? So we're just using that, we're toggling that with the variable. And then the duration, so I have this set at a second so that it was seeable by you guys, but in reality, you could set that to a really tiny number. It's totally up to you. Kind of play with that until you've got the right feel. And then also, once you've got this working, most likely you're going to go over here to the right and change the visible property of the timer, right? The user doesn't want to see the little timer clicking through. They just want to run their process. So that's how this works. And now that we know how it works, do you want to switch over and see the more complicated version? Of course you do. All right, so remember, this whole screen, all this reducing inventory stuff, we'll hit play again. Let's just create more fake inventory. So now I got 7 pieces of RAM. And so let's just take away 4, right? So that should take 2 from here, 2 from here. So hit pick, and then boop, 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 right? Awesome, it's all done. But so remember that, this is the same thing. It's gonna be more complicated, and we'll show it to you in 3 seconds. But this is more complicated, but it's the same concept. So when we start with the real easy one, because all we're gonna do here, so if you look, all pick is doing is it is updating the variable var time to use to the value of this input. So in this case, it would have set it to 4. And then it's setting var do again, right? Which is what I call my timer variable in this particular go, from false to true. So this is starting the timer. So that's all pick is doing. Now, and we needed to capture though, right? We needed to set var time to use, or I guess this should have been var items to remove. I kept changing the scenario myself, but by changing this setting this value, this 4 into that variable, that's how we make that portion dynamic, because you can't dynamically change this. Well, you could, but you're going to use a variable there. This gallery is just a filtered gallery to show you the assets that we currently have available. I am using collections for all this. Typically, if you're making updates, we're probably going to update the collection and then hit the data source, right? We want to be, you don't want to make a bunch of updates back and forth to the network, right? We don't want to call the data source over and over again. So whatever data we need to process, we throw it in collection, we process it, and then we write that collection back at the end. But you don't have to use collections. I did that for performance and to make this app, more repeatable for you guys. My create fake inventory button here. So this is the way that I'm dynamically creating the inventory, because I wanted to kind of be able to remake it. And it's important that I made it. Notice here, like I'm using asset is, shuffle, right? Which is making a random of either RAM, CPU, or GPU. And then the amount available is a random number between 0 and 3. And the reason I made this random, and you should do this while you're learning, is because this stops you from solving it perfectly, right? Like if I just set them all to hard coded and they were all 4s and I was always using 12, then so remove, it'd be 4, 8, 12. And then I would never test the half scenarios, right? So by putting weird numbers in here and re-faking the data over and over again, it let me test faster. Remember, fail fast is one of the things we really harp on. And since I was able to fail fast, I was able to make sure that I was covering all the scenarios, because this is one of those problems you're going to see in the code in 1 second. This problem is a lot harder than it seems like on paper, because you have to deal with the variable amounts. So I got all my inventory stuff, right? So this was just faking the data, but this is the section that you would need to do in order to, this is where you'd be pulling in your data from your real data source. So, and speaking of this app, remember you can download this if you sign up with the YouTube library at training.powerapps901.com. I know, another commercial, I'm sorry. But you can just download this working app if you need to reverse engineer my work better. So last but not least, you can see my timer. The duration was set to 1,000, so 1 second. Once again, if I was putting this in production, that would be a much smaller number, but right now, that's worked out really well for my testing. The start is just that var do again. And I'm not using like repeat or auto start. None of those are set. You could, get into different scenarios with those, but we're not going to deviate and do that, but you could. Also, like the one that Brody just built for his customer, he used on timer start as well as on timer end. Every time I've done these loops, I've never used on timer start, but he had some stuff he wanted to put in there. So more power to him. So on timer end, this is what you're after. All right, so the first step of this is I'm using a with. Remember, with is a way to gather something, kind of hold it as a variable, but it's just existing in this run right now. And so I'm creating a var record to update by getting the first record from the filtered table where the asset equals the selected value, so the RAM, and updated equals false, because I don't want to get any of the rows I've previously updated, and available is greater than 0. There's no reason to get the rows that have no items in it, right? So that was the first thing I had to do, is make sure that I was getting the right data set to update. It took me 4 or 5 tries of changes here. So be ready to have to deal with that. So then what I got to do, so notice here the first with ends, right? So that's where var record update goes. So comma, I do another with, so with inside of with. And so var update amount is, minimum of var record updates available. So how many did this row have available? So say that it had 3, and then versus var time to use, that's the number we need to pick. So if I need to get 5 more and this row only has 3, 3 is the minimum, right? But if I've only got 1 item left to pick and this one has 3, what's the minimum? It's the 1, right? So this is how you make sure that you don't pick more than a location has. Yeah, like I told you, little things you're gonna have to figure out as you go through this. Also here, I'm using a with inside of a with because there's a bug here that I'm not going to get into. But if you're Microsoft watching this and you want to understand the bug, I will explain it to you, but it's a complicated bug. Just trust me, guys, if you need to do this with inside of with, this is the way to go. This works. So then we're going to patch our table. We're going to patch that record that we just selected at the top. We're going to set available to be the amount that was available. So we had 3 available minus this one, that number, that min number we came up with. So if we only need to give out 1, 3 minus 1. So we would set available to 2. And then we'd set the updated property to true. So that way we know that we've updated that location. We don't go back to it. Remember, because we don't want to get caught in a loop of updating the same row over and over again. Then we're going to say update context var time to use is var time to use minus the amount we updated. So if we had 7 items to do and we just allocated 1, right? Then now we would have 6 left in that variable. We need to go get 6 more. So this step right here, you do not need this step, okay? But this, as you're going to see down here at the bottom when we run this, or maybe you already noticed, var1, I was troubleshooting. Right, this is that bug that I found that I need to go tell Microsoft about, but I'm probably too lazy to do, honestly. So this was my way of exposing the bug. So I set this variable just to put it on screen down here so I could watch the data process to see what was happening. I did not, so you could just blow this away. It would not affect you, but this was helping me visualize the process. Finally, right? So remember, we said these things run in 2 pieces. So this is everything that needs to be done. So this is done. Now we check to see, is that variable var time to use greater than 0? Do we still need more than 0? Do we need 1 or more things to be updated or pulled from inventory? Now remember, the first example we did, I counted up, right? So this doesn't have to be one way or the other. So before we just wanted to stop when we got to 10. This time we're going the opposite. We're subtracting, so we want to stop when we get to 0. So just keep that in mind, right? These are pretty flexible. You have options here. You just got to think through the logic and I'll be honest, right? If you've got a development background, this is easier. If you don't, it's okay. It's okay. We can still learn to do this. It just might take a little bit longer to do these type of things, but you absolutely can, right? Juan, our CPA, he has used these types of loops, right? You can too. And then, so if it's greater than 0, we need to run it again. So then we just do this again. I meant to add to this like a loading spinner, so they had to wait until it finished. I should have done that. I didn't, but I'm not going to re-record the video to show you loading spinner. So you probably should have started a variable when they clicked on pick that made a little loading go. And then when they got done, when you got here, if this was false, then you would have turned off that and they would have been back. I forgot. Shh, don't sue me. There you go. That's the code. And so now you've seen the code. Let's watch again. Actually, let's change the duration here though. We're going to change it to 3 seconds so we can hopefully watch a little better, right? So just change this to 3,000. Okay. So we're going to hit play. We'll reset the inventory. We'll change from RAM to GPUs. And so look, we have 7 nodes. I also added a bunch of logic. So if I do 8, it tells me there's only 7 of these, right? We're not getting all that, but you can add as many controls as you want for that. But let's pick 3, right? So that would give us let's pick 6. So all of them but 1. All right. So we'll change this to 6. Now what I want you to do is down here at the bottom you can see the timer run. We're also going to be able to see this variable, though this variable changes so fast you usually can't see it change. But var time to use, so this should go from 6 to what? It should go from 6 to 4 to 2 to 1 to 0, and then there should be one of these left, right? That's the way that this should go. And then this var1, it's going to show you the numbers that are in there. Okay, so we'll say pick. So look, 6, it finished, so now we got the 3. So it said, hey, I had 4, I removed 2. Then I had 2 and I removed 2. Then I had 1, I removed 1, and then this should say 1, or I have 0 left, and then I removed 1, right? So these variables, they're not important, but they were helping me visualize what was going on. Notice that, look, GPUs, there's only 1 left. And if we look exactly what we expected, this one was left alone, 0, 2, 0, 2, right? Updated true, 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 true. And the last one is false because we only needed 6. So there's 1 available to be picked still. So there you go. This is something, these are skills that, Power Apps doesn't have built in that you probably need, right? Building timer loops. Keep in mind that Power Automate has these types of loops available. So we do sometimes say, instead of having Power Apps do this type of shenanigans, we will send it over to Power Automate, let Power Automate do it. But in the scenarios that I just talked you through, there was no reason to introduce Power Automate, even though, it would have been easier on the flow side to build it. slightly easier, not a lot, but that added more moving parts. Now I was worried about calling flows, how long was it going to take, right? The more moving parts, the more things to troubleshoot. And we just didn't want to troubleshoot more things. So we built it this way. And then remember, we also, once you understand how this works, you can do some crazy things. Daniel one time had to do this process of allocating an indeterminate number of people into an indeterminate number of groups of 3. And so he had a timer loop to loop through the people. And then for every group of people, he then had to go put them in a group. So a separate timer loop to update the group. Like, he had nested timer groups. That is not for the faint of heart, but it absolutely worked and did everything that he wanted. So yeah, questions, comments, leave them below, right? Was this too nerdy? Are you mad at me? Or you're probably not watching if this was too nerdy, but these are always the tough videos for me to do. I mean, I think these are awesome things to teach, but sometimes you guys are like, that's too much. So let me know below if I should just go back to simpler stuff. Yeah, check out those training classes. And with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day.